Blast Burn Charizard is now in Pokemon Go. You might be wondering, just how good is it? Well, unfortunately, it's not as good as we initially thought it would be. In my original analysis on Blast Burn, I was using information that Niantic gave the channel GameWith on Blast Burn Charizard. In this pre-release information, it showed that Blast Burn was going to be a clone of Frenzy Plant. So basing analysis off of that, it appeared that Blast Burn Charizard would be as good, if not slightly better in DPS compared to Moltres. But 8 hours after my analysis, some say Niantic reacted to it, a Datamine was done, and the Blast Burn that we found was not the Blast Burn that we were shown. This new Blast Burn, instead of having 100 base power, had 110, which sounds like it's going to swag even harder. Unfortunately, they gave it a 3.3 second cooldown instead of a 2.6 second cooldown. Now, it sounds like it might not be that big of a deal, but if you're unaware, as far as DPS goes in Pokemon Go, those small deciseconds really make or break a Pokemon's performance. Immediately following that Datamine, GamePress, PokeBattler, and myself released some initial forays into what this nerf meant for Charizard. Overall, it didn't really look like it was going to be that big of a deal, but Charizard... So these are the results from GamePress's Comprehensive DPS TDO spreadsheet. Up here we have the old Blast Burn Charizard, the Frenzy Plant clone one, and here you can see that the DPS was a smidge higher than Moltres's. With the new nerfed Blast Burn, it is now quite a bit below Moltres, yeah, like about 0.5, 0.4 comprehensive DPS, a bit lower than Moltres. You might notice Heatran's thrown in here, and I put him in there as like kind of a funsy. Let people know that Gen 4 is coming up in the near future, and when Heatran comes out, it will most likely be better than them all. So I kind of threw that in my previous analysis to give more credence to Blast Burn Charizard, because why waste your dust and candy on Moltres when you can save for this boy? And I feel that argument still exists here, even though Charizard is a bit nerfed. Even with the nerf, this is a pretty big deal for Charizard, because it is still 1.5 DPS higher than what it was without the Blast Burn, and overall Charizard is the best non-legendary fire type as far as DPS and TDO is concerned. It's still pretty good for Charizard. It's still a cutback from what he could have been. Now, as far as what this looks like in a raid scenario, here is an example of the Regice raid that we will be experiencing in the future of Pokemon Go, using the movesets that are currently in the Game Master for Regice. With the old Blast Burn Charizard, you could see that it's sort of like a improved Machamp, slightly less tanky Moltres, but with the new Blast Burn Charizard, the true one that we actually have now, it's sort of like a slightly better Hariyama. What this means is that Blast Burn Charizard certainly is not bad. As far as going into the Regice or Registeel raids in the near future, it'll be an excellent option. Still better than Entei, depending on how you value DPS and TDO. Definitely a cut below Moltres, but if you don't have a Moltres powered up and you're not interested in powering up a Moltres, then your Blast Burn Charizard and your Machamps and your Hariyamas will serve you quite well in those future raids. Now, you might be thinking, Ryan, swag, I thought Blast Burn Charizard was supposed to have more DPS than Moltres with the old Frenzy Plant clone one. What's it doing lower than Regice here? Well, the thing is, with the Comprehensive DPS spreadsheet, that's using the average of Comprehensive DPS. Fortunately for us, my boy Bioweapon whipped us up a full range graph of the old Blast Burn Charizard compared to Moltres. So what this graph is showing is the damage that's going into Charizard and Moltres if they both had the defense of 1, and what that translates into for their DPS output in general, in kind of like a vacuum. Down here you see Registeel, Regice, and Victory Bell, and that's kind of just letting you know reference points of what the DPS in, so the damage that Charizard and Moltres are taking that influence their energy gains. Kind of reference what those Pokemon look like, what these in the vacuum numbers kind of look like. And here at 900 we have the spreadsheet default. So overall Bioweapon, who runs the spreadsheet, made the spreadsheet. He's the, the wizard, the math master. He decided that 900 would be probably the best sort of average for comparing Pokemon. And at that average, you can see that Charizard is doing a smidge better than Moltres, which is what we saw on the spreadsheet with that 0.1, better DPS. But in the Regice fight and the Registeel fight, you'll see that Moltres would be performing better there than Charizard because, it's behind that. Essentially, they're dealing damage that's so low that Moltres is going to more readily get off multiple overheats, where Charizard's Blast Burns aren't going to make that big of a difference. But in a more intense fight where you're taking tons of damage, like Victory Bell with Acid and Sludge Bomb, then Charizard has a more clear advantage. Well, this graph is showing you the old Blast Burn, the Frenzy Plant based one. The new nerfed Blast Burn, unfortunately, Charizard and Moltres, rather than intersecting at 800, intersect at about 1450, which is way off to the right. You can't even see it on this graph. And talking to Bioweapon, who understands this model way better than I do, he says that like 1450 DPS in basically means that Moltres isn't getting a single overheat off, which, if you're not getting overheat off and Charizard's getting at least one Blast Burn off, you can imagine that the DPS would be better for Charizard. Now, something I find very interesting about all this is this raid perspective, right, doesn't really consider gym battles. And one area where Blast Burn Charizard kind of innately has an advantage over Moltres is in gym battles, because it's got that 2-bar charge move instead of the 1. When we were looking at that DPS in out graph, it was kind of like a super intense, you're getting pummeled super hard and you can't get off that single overheat, and that's where Charizard has an advantage. Well, in a gym scenario, we all know that having a single bar charge move not go off isn't exactly a negative or an intense thing. It's actually kind of like a everyday thing, and that's where the advantage of Blast Burn, a multi-bar charge move, kind of shows through. But where's the graph on that, Ryan Swag? Well, the graph on that's right here, with GamePress branding, because I forgot to put my branding on it. Swag. Yeah, so we can see here that the Blast Burn nerf really hasn't done a whole lot to harm the Charizard. For some reorientation here, the bottom is now time to win instead of total damage output. And the more left you are, the better your Pokemon is in DPS, because you're beating the gym battle much faster. And the y-axis is now the total damage output. Another way of thinking about that for a gymming battle is like the tankiness of the Pokemon. The percentage of, right here we're looking at Blissey, so the percentage of Blisseys that this single Pokemon will defeat on average before going down itself. So here we got BB Zard Old and BB Zard Blast Burn Zard, right? Yeah, BB. That shorthand swag, right? So actually, in a neutral scenario, without the C clear weather boost, the new Blast Burn Charizard is actually slightly better. And the reason why it could be better, and is better in some scenarios, for gymming is because in a gym battle, rather than DPS, there's a bit more of a focus on DPE, damage per energy. DPE doesn't consider time at all. It just considers the energy cost of the charge move and the damage of the charge move. Since these two attacks have the same energy cost and the new Blast Burn has 10 more damage, if you think about it, it's going to be slightly better for gymming. How much that comes out in practice, is a little bit more questionable, but it's still there, and you can still definitely see it here in this scenario. Now with a clear weather boost, the weather that you want to be fighting with your Charizards in, there really isn't much difference at all. There's a slight change in their TDO, and that's likely because of the higher animation time. Chances are your Blast Burn Charizard could get caught mid-animation and then get hit by a Dazzling Gleam, or the animation to KO could be so long that you might take on an extra Zen Headbutt or two, which hurts their tankiness, does some extra damage in. But aside from that, the Blast Burn Charizards, the buffed and the nerfed one, look basically the same. And depending on how you value it, they both are extremely competitive with Focus Blast Mewtwo, Entei, Moltres, and Groudon. And one super advantage that Charizard has, as we've already discussed, is it's got that multi-bar charge move in Blast Burn, where the Mewtwo here is using Focus Blast, single bar charge move. The Entei here is using Overheat, single bar charge move. Moltres, guess what charge move it has? And Groudon, it's using Solar Beam, because that's better than Earthquake, right? Yeah. So you could make the argument that Flamethrower Entei has that same sort of niche that Blast Burn Charizard does, and while some oversight here, I didn't graph it, it would be a bit more to the right, you know, a much later time to win, so Blast Burn Charizard would have an advantage in DPS there. So I think that this makes it a very viable option. Of course, we're not all fighting level 40 Zen Headbutt Blissies every single day. We're mostly fighting demotivated ones. So having that earlier charge move, you know, half the energy cost, 50 with the Blast Burn, could end fights a lot sooner for you. So I think Charizard is now a pretty swag gym battler. But if you're fighting Blissey and time is your main focus, then of course Machamp, indisputed Blissey Blitzen King right there. And if you're really concerned about potions and revives, there's no real stopping the Metagross or the Entei. Not that big of a drop in TDO, much better DPS. So yeah, so some things to consider. Overall, I'm kind of bummed about the Blast Burn Charizard nerf. It always sucks to be shown something that's really cool and then given something that's a bit less. It's also kind of weird that they decided to nerf it within 24 hours of giving GameWith that pre-release information. Sneakily 8 hours after my analysis on how good it actually is. But hey, Blast Burn Charizard is not that bad. It's actually still quite good. It's just 0.5 DPS less than what it could have been. It's no longer super threatening to Moltres, but as I showed you, Heatran's coming out in the future. If you're going to stock up on rare candies and Stardust, I'd stock up for that guy, and just get by with your budget Charizards. How do you guys feel about the Blast Burn Charizard nerf? Should Niantic bring it back to its former glory, or is the variety here? It's a little nerf, but it's a little different than Frenzy Plant. Do you guys like that a little bit more? Comment below, let me know. And if you have any questions on this content, I am very happy to answer them for you. And if you like this deep Pokemon Go analysis type stuff, then subscribe to the Swagman if you haven't already. SwagTips. By the way, yeah, I'm back and I am not dead. It's been like, I think 2 weeks since I've uploaded on this channel. Yeah, I had finals to go through. I had anniversary with my girlfriend, wedding, a whole bunch of stuff going on. So I've been really pressed for time, really crunched. And making the content for these videos is pretty easy, but like editing them and all that kind of stuff, very time consuming, very stressful, and I had other things I had to be focusing on. So sorry for the delay, but the Swagman is here. I'm not sure what video I'm going to do next. I know Ho-Oh is out, but like, I'm pretty sure we all know how to beat a Ho-Oh. Maybe I can throw in a little extra kind of spin on it for you. You know, I think Kyogre is pretty good for the fight if you've seen the meme already. But some controversy with that because Solar Beam, people don't believe in the Swagman. I get it, I get it. Oh yeah, we also got a Datamine on SmackDown. It looks like a Rock Throw clone, so I can do a bit more of a in-depth variety sort of analysis there. But given that Niantic's been doing some weird bait and switches lately, showing us this Blast Burn, then changing this Blast Burn, I don't know. Is that SmackDown going to be the SmackDown that we actually get? Is it going to be nerfed? Is it going to be better? You know, if you think about it, maybe I shouldn't do an analysis on SmackDown, because if they were going to give it to something like Tyranitar, and it turns out that it's super crazy good on Tyranitar, maybe we don't want Niantic knowing right away. I don't know. Let me know what your thoughts are on that. Oh yeah, and if you're curious, what's it called? Pogo Fest, right? Yeah, I'm going. Buddy hooked me up with my ticket. So Saturday North, you may get the chance to see the Swagman. Who knows? So yeah, let's see what goes on with that. I'll post more information about my Go Fest plans later.